Hello everybody, today you are watching the Tropics Topics of May 23rd, 2018. This is my first video update pertaining to the 2018 Atlantic hurricane season, which, climatologically speaking, has not started yet. It starts on Friday, June 1st, which is in about 9 days from today, but even though it is not yet the climatological peak of hurricane season, we already have an area of interest to watch, which is being dubbed Invest 90L, down here near the coastline of the currently near the coastline of the Yucatan Peninsula, which has been given a 10% chance of development in the next 48 hours, but a high chance of development, a 70% chance in the next 5 days or by Monday. And this is where problems start to arise because this weekend is Memorial Day weekend, so a lot of people are going to be vacationing towards the coast. Impacts for the system won't be really wind related, but they will be heavy rain related, and there could be quite a bit of it. But first, let's get into the whole breakdown of this system and its structure. So here's a visible satellite loop off of the MSFC site from NASA, and we can see a couple of things. First thing we notice is that there is quite a bit of convection here. Yesterday there was just a bit scattered convection and not very well organized at that. But today we're seeing more in the way of organized convection. In fact, there is even a bit of broad mid-level rotation in the area that is starting to instigate some development of the system. But you can see that there is still some wind shear. You can see these, cirrus clouds blowing off towards the east-northeast, the thunderstorm tops being blown off. That is being generated by an upper trough, and we'll get onto the synoptics in just a minute. But let's take a look at the mesoscale pattern. We can see that these trade winds right here are moving extremely quickly, which you would expect for late May in the Caribbean Sea. But then you start to notice that they kind of slow down and even divert a little bit towards the southwest, which can be confirmed by this ASCAT pass from not too long ago, showing the winds coming from the east-southeast and then diverting from the east-southeast to an east-northeasterly direction right here just off the coast of Belize. And that is what we see here. And what this shows you is that there is a bit of a surface trough that is forming in this area, which is where the National Hurricane Center has, basically initialized the center of this, of 90L. And because of that, it's really beginning to get its act together because there is some surface feature here. And in fact, even if you look, it has a pretty broad influence, because if you look up here in the Southern Gulf, you'll see the trades obviously moving in this area, but then you start to note how it kind of diverts kind of towards the south, which is indicative that there is some sort of a low forming here at the surface, which is what you need for tropical cyclone genesis. And it's still a mess. It's still pretty messy, but you don't really expect much else for this time of year. We're not expecting a powerful hurricane or anything to come and develop in the Gulf of Mexico. Nothing like that. If anything, if it does develop at all, it will be a weak tropical storm and not even a wind threat. It would be a rain threat for the United States. And moving along in the future, we can kind of take a look really quick at some of the synoptic patterns here. So this loop is a bit choppy. I apologize for that. But we can kind of get the general idea of what's going on here. So right now, here's our low right here, marked by this L. This is a bit choppy. In fact, yeah, this is kind of choppy, but I guess we'll work with it. And in fact, let me see if I can refresh. Okay, that didn't work. So we'll just have to stick with this. In fact, let me just pause. I'm just gonna pause it. So here's our low right here, and we had this trough over the Gulf of Mexico. That has since lifted out and is now in this. Whoops, sorry about that. It is over here right now, weakening and kind of diverting off towards the southwest. But there is still some shear over here because you have another, kind of weak low that just emerged off of South Texas that is instigating a little bit, and I mean a little bit, of shear over, over 90L, which is kind of shearing some of these thunderstorms a little bit. But this is not nearly as severe as it was the other day, because if we take a look at the other day, we had this low right here, and we had really strong shear, just blowing these thunderstorms tops off, just not letting really anything develop. We don't have that now. It's more of kind of a weak shearing flow, and now that we have this kind of rotation in this area, kind of oriented like this, we can kind of tell that because the shear is letting up, that there's some sort of a mid-level feature that is forming atop the already forming surface trough right here, kind of where I just marked it, the L. And this whole like just convective, gyre, I guess you want to call it, this broad area of low pressure. This whole thing is expected to translate up into the Gulf of Mexico by this weekend. Why is it doing that? Because we have this high over here in this general area that's instigating this, this southerly flow pushing 90L into the Gulf of Mexico. And as it does that, it is also going to shove it closer towards land. In fact, if we take a look at the models really quick here, this is courtesy of Tropical Tidbits. This is the ECMWF, or the European model, which in general has a better handle on this whole scenario, I think. There are some problems with the other models, particularly the GFS, but I'll get into that in a minute. And you can see that we have this area of rotation, shown here by these yellows and kind of yellowish oranges areas. And you can also note that the wind barbs right here, these wind vectors, are opposing each other, so they're moving in opposite directions over here. That means that there is a broad area of low pressure at the 850 millibar level, which is give or take a mile above the surface, so not too far up into the troposphere. And if we progress this a little bit, here's Saturday morning, we have a little bit of a vorticity center, a vorticity maxima, forming just to the north of the Yucatan Peninsula by Saturday. So this is not too far out. And then as it moves, further up towards the north, it becomes, pretty much a legitimate tropical cyclone. And in fact, in this model run, it's it's starting to move a little bit further west. Maybe because there's, let's see, because there's like this ridge over here that's kind of building in. But then it kind of slowly moves towards Louisiana. Now it's going to make landfall there. That does not mean that the worst impacts will be there. That just means it's going to make landfall in Louisiana, according to this one model run. And this all makes sense because, you have this ridge right here that's propelling this thing north, and then kind of starts to kind of try to back off a little bit as this semi-frontal boundary, I guess, is moving in off the coast of North Carolina and kind of eroding at this, so that slows down the motion of our system here. It might or might not be a tropical cyclone by this point. And then it moves inland and into the eastern United States, and the rest is history. So here's the GFS model, the American model, at the same height in the troposphere. This has been kind of all over the place recently because it's been having issues with convective feedback. So what that basically is just that sometimes when you have these really weak and kind of broad areas of low pressure, sometimes the GFS will initialize an area of higher vorticity, and then kind of basically use that mesovortex and just absorb all the rest of the energy from within the gyre and just kind of feed back into itself and create an unrealistically small, as you can see right here, tropical cyclone. This is the solution which I'm kind of throwing out. So don't really pay attention to this extremely tiny tropical storm impacting in between Tampa and like Port Charlotte or that general area. Don't really pay too much attention to that, because more than likely that's just kind of an outlier scenario. Those are the two main forecast models. In fact, the HWRF has just released its first. In fact, let me actually go out to the more widened version. So the HWRF has initiated model runs, and you can kind of see that, yes, you have this really broad area of rotation, and then kind of at the 850 millibar level still, and then it starts to consolidate more, and this would be a bona fide tropical storm moving towards the Florida Panhandle in this run. So that's the HWRF solution. But what we need to do is don't really focus on the core of this, because all the rain is going to be offset towards the east of the storm. This HWRF doesn't really have, whatever you call it, the precipitation, but you can see here in these humidity and kind of like, the total precipitable water here, we have a lot of, greens and blues right over Florida, and kind of making this little bit of comma shape over this general area, which means that a lot of rain is going to be pumped into Florida, Georgia, Alabama, and even Mississippi Mississippi and eastern Louisiana to an extent. So pretty much the entire southeastern United States should expect a lot of rainfall this weekend. And in fact, if I show you the GFS model, even though its initialization isn't exactly correct, we can see that, interesting, it kind of well, that's a different storm, so my bad. We can see that there's still a lot of rain coming towards Florida, and they've been having a lot of rain recently, so that is not what they need at the moment. Also, just ignore that long-range tropical cyclone. Anything past 10 days isn't really reliable. I just kind of scroll a little bit too far ahead. My apologies. So, how much rainfall should we expect in the area? Well, anywhere between 7 inches in South Florida is what the WPC graphic is depicting here. It could be more. It would not be too difficult to generate flash flooding in the area, considering how much rain they've had over the past week or so. In fact, this isn't their first tropical system they've been dealing with. There's another little area of interest that formed near Florida, and that ended up not developing, but it still dumped a lot of rain over Florida. So these areas need to be vigilant for the potential for heavy rainfall and flash flooding, as that could be a huge problem and a dampering to many Memorial Day weekend plans in this area of the country. And apart from 90L, there is nothing else going on in the Atlantic or the Eastern Pacific. So that is basically it on 90L. I will have another video update out tomorrow or Friday if needed. And for now, I'm going to leave you with this graphic. And thank you for watching, and remember to stay weather alert during this time.